Hello pianists, you just heard Minuet in G major from the Anna Magdalena Bach notebook published in 1725. It is one of the easiest Baroque piano pieces that you can learn as a beginner. This piece is excellent for developing your sight reading and hand independent skills, which I'll carefully guide you through today in the tutorial. The Baroque word actually comes from the French language and it means irregularly shaped, as it was first used to describe pearls. Eventually it came to describe an extravagant form of art and music, as it describes all the curving lines, gilt, and gold. J.S. Bach was actually the premier Baroque composer, and you can learn how to play Baroque pieces and performance practice within this beginning minuet, as he uses the graceful curving lines you'll hear in the polyphony of the left hand versus the different right hand. Stay tuned as I'll show you some unique Baroque characteristics within this minuet. I've ranked this minuet a 2.5 difficulty level out of 10. I'll show you carefully how I've arrived at this score by going through my Bronson musical learning pyramid. You can also check out one of my other tutorials on Beethoven's Articulations, which was ranked a little bit harder at a 2.8 difficulty level from the classical era. These are great pieces to compare and contrast things that are similar, but also things that are very different that you can learn from a Baroque piece versus a classical piece. This minuet tutorial will serve as actually part one, where I teach you how to learn and practice through my Bronson musical learning pyramid. We'll go carefully through how to tap the rhythm, how to learn the notes with all the expansions and contractions, how to work on the slurs, which will give that textural differences between the two curving lines, dynamics to make it sound like a minuet, and the style and mood. Once you've got this really secure within the hands, I would suggest you check out part two, where I teach you on all of the wrist circles and forearm rotation to play with ease and much expression. Within that technique video, I'll show you a very carefully notated score so you can see the under and over direction for my wrist circles, when you should turn left, when you should turn right. That way you can play it like I do. I have further developed my Bronson musical learning pyramid, and I've broken each category down into specific skills that might make it challenging or easy. So for my ranking analysis, the note reading and fingering is actually the most difficult category, as the piece is polyphonic. Let me explain that term that I've been using. Polyphony is really describing the Baroque concept of those curving lines as they're different between the hands. Let me demonstrate this at measures 13 through 16. Listen very carefully to the right hand melody versus what the left hand's doing. They're different. You could hear that the left hand was lifting at different times than the right hand. This is very unique to the Baroque era, but this contrasts perhaps that Beethoven Articulations from the classical era, which uses homophony, meaning a melody over a supportive accompaniment. So you can hear that left hand, which is broken chords. It's a true accompaniment to support what the right hand is doing. So you can check out that other tutorial and then also come back and practice the polyphony with me on the minuet. Due to the polyphony within this piece, the left hand really gets a great workout. It has to be very independent from the right hand, as it's playing different notes and rhythms and articulations. So if you want to really work on that left hand sight reading and independent skills, check out this minuet. The left hand not only has different rhythms and slur lifts, it's through composed, meaning that all the way through there's really not repeating patterns of the notes. So you have to keep looking ahead for all the different intervals, those expansions and contractions the left hand has. So this is a great hand independence and sight reading skill development for your left hand. So the two most difficult skills that you're really going to learn that I'll coach you on within this tutorial are the slur lifts that occur at different times, as I demonstrated before, and really how to bring it all together within the style and mood, given the hand and finger independence through the polyphonic lines. This will be a great piece to learn how to trust your hands, not have to watch it, to think groupings of notes, and that technique will help you to group those notes together as well. Before I teach you how to play this piece, pianists, let's just give you a little background info about the Anna Magdalena notebook and also the minuet style, which will really influence how we learn this piece. So Anna Magdalena was actually J.S. Bach's second wife, and this notebook was put together for her 24th birthday. You can see a picture of it. It was beautiful. It was green. It had ribbons. What a beautiful birthday gift. Not all the pieces were actually composed by Johann Sebastian Bach, but it actually was a collection compiled by him from his friends within the Bach family circle. So this minuet that you'll learn today is actually attributed to Christian Petzold. A little background info about the minuet. This was a French noble dance that was danced by one couple on the ballroom at a time. So I think that's where the polyphony comes in. You can hear the right hand is the female dancer with all those turning motions. The left hand's very dignified like the male dancer. Has those slower rhythms. That's why they lift at different times with the slurs, as they have their own choreography. We also know that the minuet had specific steps. So there's actually 4 steps that they would take, and then a plie, which is the ballet term for gentle bending at the knees. So you'll hear step, 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 plie. So the ends of the phrases will be very light. That's the standard choreography, although you'll hear some variations throughout the piece that Bach uses. Where you can learn this with me, it's available in public domain. I'm also going to be using the great editing that comes from Jane McGraw's Master at Classics, Level 3. You can find another book review where I talk about the different types of classical books you can use. It also appears in Faber's Piano Literature Book 2. You can find the links to those books for you to purchase within the description of this video. All right, pianists, let's jump in with learning this with our Bronson Musical Learning Pyramid. We always start with the rhythm, which is critical for all pieces, but especially for a minuet, it has to have a sense of stability, but also some flexibility, as this was just two people together, so they could just move and be very graceful as they dance this. So we look at our time signature, we're in 3/4. For a dance, a minuet, or a waltz, the emphasis is always lightly on beat 1. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So we'll use that to inform our technique with arm weight and dynamics as we get into that. But even as you tap this or play this along with me, give that slight emphasis on beat 1. And rather than me going all the way through and tapping the rhythms with you, I'm going to go through just specific patterns that this piece really groups into. So sometimes the beginner makes a mistake and they just think each note individually. With the polyphonic piece, you're really going to get lost trying to do that. It'll take way too long to try to learn all the notes. So my suggestion is you think groupings of notes that all go together. We'll group notes for note reading, we'll group it for technique, and then it can flow. You can look ahead. And that's what you need to do to be a good sight reader. Think patterns, trust your hand, look ahead on the score. So I've color-coded the rhythms that this piece is going to introduce to you. The first one is in measures 1 to 2. So we're going to tap this out. I'm going to play it and you can count along with me. Here it is. 1, 2, 3. 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3. And you can even just find all those instances of that all the way throughout the piece. The next pattern is at measure 5. It just shortens what we did in measure 1. So we have measure 5, 1 and 2 and 3 and then that repeats throughout that line. The next pattern is at measure 20. So we have a quarter note, which is 1 and 2 and 3, and that's the primary patterns of the right hand. So you could go through and find all the instances of that and practice clapping it or tapping it. Once you get into measure 21 to the end, it's pretty unique. So that's the spot that you really should focus on. Wherever it's different, do some extra practice on that. So here's 21 to the end. I am going to play that. Once you just practice clapping or tapping, tap your foot along, but count along. Here's 21. 1, 2, 3. 1 and 2 and 3 and 1. Quarter notes. 1, 2, 3. Measure 25 to 26 is that pattern 3. 1 and 2 and 3. 1 and 2. Quarter notes. Eighth notes. All eighth notes. 3 quarter notes. And that dotted half note. All right, let's look at the left hand. The left hand's a little bit more simple. It takes a little bit slower, dignified steps. So here we have measure 1. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. There's a series, a lot of dotted half notes. The measures you might have to isolate are at measure 8, where you have quarter note, 1 and 2 and 3 and 1. There's the left hand on page 1. Let's look at the most complex rhythms in the left hand. Look at measure 25. So very carefully look at the editing of this piece and the notation from Bach. We see that the left hand, the bottom note is stemmed down. So we have a half note for the B's, 2, 3. Think like two instrumentalists. Perhaps this is even like the cello versus the viola. So we're going to hold the 3, the thumb comes in while I hold the 3, and then the thumb holds while I replay that third finger. So we have 1, hold it, hold the D, lift for the B. 1 and 2 and 3, same thing. Hold the C, hold the E, lift. So become very comfortable at playing that. Just isolate that. You can slow it down. The same idea occurs at measure 29. The bass part has a dotted half note. I'm going to hold that all the way through the measure, where on beat 3, my 2 finger is going to play. So we have hold it, 1, 2, 3, and then they would lift together. So 3 measures, you have to hold a finger while the other one plays. Careful on your rhythm. So I would first just tap that, clap it, hands separate. You could even practice then tapping that along with my demonstration. If you need a little bit of help on how to tap that hands together, sometimes my students find success in using the words of both right and left. So I'm going to tap it first and I'll play it so you can practice that. Here's measure 1 to 2. So they both will tap together. Both, right, right, both, right, both, right, right. That will be really helpful just to coach where you're supposed to tap. All right, in summary for our rhythm category, let's talk about the performance tempo. There's a lot of debate about how fast you should actually play a minuet. Many people play it too quick for the actual choreography that was possible. You also have to think about the culture and the dress that the females would have been wearing in that time. They would have had a very large dress with petticoats underneath. They would have had actually powdered wigs they had to balance carefully on their head. So it would have been impossible for them to actually dance this too quick. So don't exceed really that allegro tempo of about 126 to 138. But I think even down into a slower andante walking tempo at 76 to 126 is very appropriate. A little advice too with all the polyphony. Avoid as a beginner just going really fast in the easy parts and then slowing it down. It should have a stable kind of feeling. So make sure you build a strong foundation at a slow, steady beat. All right, pianists, let's move up to the note reading and fingering category. This is the overall most difficult category within our learning pyramid, as there's 3 skills that are great for you to develop your hand independence and sight reading skills. The first one is the use of some pattern and some complex note patterns. It does have some frequent hand position shifts, especially in the left hand where you have to extend and contract your hand. I'll coach you through how to do that. Even though the right hand has many beautiful repeating patterns in G5 finger scales, the left hand does not. It's pretty through composed, meaning like a sense of poetry. They have new words, it doesn't repeat things from before. It keeps it very beautiful in the left hand. Also, each hand has some hand extensions, meaning it has to become larger than like a 5-finger scale. Also has some contractions. You have to make your hands a little bit smaller within some shifting positions. So once you get moved, here's an expansion, up a 6th, contract a 3rd. Then you're within a 5-finger scale and an octave. So it's great for developing those standard patterns of 5-finger scales and octaves. All that you can feel and you can trust your hand and not have to watch it, which is great for sight reading. All right, let's start with what's easy about the note reading. We have the G major scale, which is the same key as our Beethoven écossais, so you can practice these in tandem. So we'll warm up on a G 5-finger scale, all white notes. Also has a few octave scales, never uses G, but uses like kind of an A and a D variation. You can warm up in that scale for G. So I'd encourage you to think those patterns rather than individual notes. You're gonna get really lost in the texture of this piece. All right, let's begin with the right hand. And I've color-coded some of these patterns. It uses primarily a G 5-finger scale over and over. So we'll go through and we'll use some landmark notes and some intervals to help you learn this. So the right hand starts in a D5, goes down a 5th, eyes on the score, not your hand, back down the 5th. We're gonna extend up a 6th, contract a 3rd, F sharp, down an octave. All right, let me give you some practice strategies. You can use it here and you can transfer this to really any piece that has expansions and contractions. So think your groups of notes, look ahead. I'm looking ahead to the 6th. My finger starts to feel it early as well. To get that comfortable in the hand, you could just practice blocking that together to automatize that kinesthetic feel. You can also just go back and forth. Don't watch your hand. This is how we learn this kinesthetic trust. Okay, once you can play measure 2 to the 6th, this one's probably even more challenging, a 5-1 contraction. Just practice rotating back and forth on that. So let's practice the extension, contraction. Here we have measure 2, beat 3, G, up a 6th, 3rd, F sharp, octave. If you're not comfortable with octaves yet, this piece will help you become comfortable. You can block those so your hand remembers what to extend down. Here's what practice would look like again. You look ahead, get that 6th ready, contract, down the octave. All of that done without having to watch my hand at all. I trust it. Let's keep my eyes on the score and look ahead for the fluency. We're at measure 5. I'm on that landmark C, number 5, steps, still in a G 5-finger scale, over to F sharp, little grace note, and then measure 9 to 12, repeat just like before, 5-finger scale, extend up a 6th, contract 3rd, extend octave, 4th. This is a little different, goes up, down to the F sharp. Such a beautiful line, so lyrical. All right, the only spot I think you really need to watch in the right hand is at measure 17, where it jumps up to this B number 5. But while you're playing the G at measure 16, have your eyes spot it early. When you move up, you're in like an E minor 5-finger scale. We extend down a step to D, stay there, cross over, and then you're in an A major 5-finger scale. By those 5-finger scales, you shouldn't keep your hands extended out. You should keep it within a 5-finger scale extension. That way you're ready. Here's 21, scale, thumb under, steps, contract it to the 4, 6, 3rd. And sometimes beginners find that line a little tricky from 22 through 24. So I would suggest you do some additive practice, meaning note by note you add it on. So here's a 21. This is pretty easy. This is a little more difficult, that contraction. So you could start at 22 seconds. Just isolate and repeat. Your brain needs time just to learn these skills. So you can practice stopping on 23, the F sharp. Then you add on the next note. Here's 22. Steps down the 6th. And if that's a hard extension, just practice rotating through it. 6th, 3rd, and then you're back into an A 5-finger scale. 25 moves down a step, back to G. 2 over, extend it up a 6th. Finger 4 and D. Over, D scale with a C, natural, seconds. And then this last G over B chord. And you heard in my demonstration, I rolled that. You could add that kind of beauty as well at the end. So get the right hand very comfortable, practice it with metronome, nice and slow. Remember, don't go faster on the easy parts, but keep it all at one stable tempo. Let's go into the left hand next. The left hand, like the right hand, also uses MIDI G 5-finger scales, and I start with a G chord. It's on a G3, just a 4th below middle C. Very stepwise motion, so trust your hand and look ahead on the score. So we have 1, 2 up by steps, middle C, down a 2nd, down a 2nd again, 2, 3, look ahead, G chord, all 3rds. Here's the first extension. Okay, we're just going to isolate that. Wherever you have extensions and contractions, those are the measures to pause, go back and repeat so they become comfortable. Measure 8, extend. That's how I even practice my pieces like that, where I have to do things that go out of hand positions, you just isolate it. Let's start at 8, octave, 7th. Go on your way, 2nds, 3rds, up a 4th, 2, 3, 2nd, 4, 2, F sharp, 4, 3, up a 3rd, 2nd, 2nd, octave, 4th, 2, 3. You'll notice in these Baroque pieces at the cadences like 7 to 8 and 15 into 16, the left hand becomes a bit more difficult, so isolate those. Here's at major 14, beat 3, 2nd octave to the 4th. And you could block those octaves so those become kinesthetically memorized in your hand without you having to watch. Let's move into measure 17. For our left hand goes back to the G3, now with a 2-finger, so I'm in a D 5-finger scale. So we have G, down a 2nd to F sharp, look ahead by 3rds, up a 4th, down an octave, back up the octave, 3rd finger over. We have 3rd, 2nd, 6th, 3rd, octave, 7th. So that's a spot to go back and do that additive practice. Let me try that again. At measure 22, you're on your 3rd finger, 2nd, 6th, 3rd, octave, 7th. Here we have 3rds, 3rds again, 2nds, look ahead, move early, 4, hold it, 3rd, 3rd, 2nd, extend, 6th, 3rd, 4th. Okay, so my advice, if you were watching my hand carefully, you saw that I was moving my fingers early into position with those expansions and the contractions. So not only do you look ahead with your eyes, looking ahead guides that your fingers should also move early for you. And that's how pianists play very fluently. Practice that hand separate, even push it on your metronome tempos so those become automatized, thinking groups of notes. But a caution to not stay too long hand separate. You need to start fairly early in your practice, putting it hands together so you start to unite the way those hands work together. So we have to think about the way the hands move similarly or differently. So we look back at the beginning, think the intervals that are moving the same way. So we have a seconds, both go up by seconds. This is a little different here. They go out by a second. Parallel movements. They go out by seconds. A little different, like a D chord, 3rds. So you're going to find the spots, like I mentioned with the left hand, are the last 2 measures of those phrases to isolate to get those comfortable. Let me show you how the notes also can move in a parallel movement. Let's look at 22 through 24. Individually, this was a little difficult, but once you've got it worked out hand separate, the intervals are the same. Here's measure 22, down by seconds, up by seconds, sixth, third, back to D. Let's practice that again. Notice the intervals are the same. Down by seconds, back up by seconds, sixth, third to a D. So go even slower than your hand separate practice when you go back hands together. If there's a measure that misses anything, just stop and go back and repeat it and get that comfortable. Put it back into the context of the whole phrase. All right, pianists, it might take several weeks just to become very comfortable at the rhythm and the note reading of this piece. Just take your time, come back to the chapters, practice along with me before you're ready to go on to really the expressive part of the pieces. So we're gonna go into articulations together. And the single most difficult aspect within articulations is the slur lifts. And we can really only do slur lifts on our modern forte piano as we can stay connected. However, these pieces would have been played back in Bach's time on the clavichord or the harpsichord, which is more of a detached kind of sound. So these are editorial articulations and slurs. So I'll be following what McGraw uses, but you might find another edition which does it a little bit different. But the slur lifts I'll talk about today will still apply to those different editions. So let me first do a demonstration where I would play it all completely smooth, and then I'll go back and I'll add some slur lifts. Let's listen to that at measure 17. Sounds like a beautiful aria that way, but let's hear what it sounds like when I pay attention to some slur lifts. It sounds more like a dance, hopefully. All right, let's talk about how to know when to add those. You can have a good addition, but the idea is mostly stepwise motion would be smooth with a slur. Larger spacious intervals like those octaves and fifths, the repeated notes, would be a kind of detached sound. So that's a tasteful way to add it in. So if we look back at the addition by Jane McGraw, wherever the slur ends, we're going to lift our finger like there's a little breath in the music. I would time that on the and beat or an eighth note beat. So I'm going to count it out so you can hear that. Here's back at the beginning. 1 and 2 and 3 and 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 1. Hopefully you heard that. I was lifting on those and beats before, so if you can count along or even put a metronome at the eighth note beat, that would be great to time that. So those lift at the same time. Once you get into measure 5 through 20, they're lifting at different times. So very carefully listen to that. Here's at measure 5. Right lifts, left lifts right, left, left, both lift, right lifts, right lifts, left, right, 2, 3. And that's actually how I have my students practice it, is we say which hand is lifting. So you pay attention, you have to look ahead. That's why you've got to trust your hands to watch where those slurs are beginning and ending. Let's go on to measure 17. You can even just practice watching the score with me and see if you can look ahead and say right and left with me. 17, 1, 2, 3. Right, left, right, left, left. Then the left hand lifts there at 24. Both together. Both lifts. Both lifts. Both lifts. Both. Then left. Lifts. You might have noticed, actually, as we got into the harder note reading part of 21 to the end, the slurring thankfully became a little bit easier. They were lifting together. So on the easier note reading, you have to lift at different times, but on the harder parts, they're actually going to lift together. So I think you'll find your articulation job is a little bit easier there. I do want you to keep it connected with the actual fingers. They would not have had pedal at that time period. It's fine to add a little bit of pedal in Baroque pieces, but I think as a beginner, just train your fingers to do that slurred kind of touch and wait for the pedal later. All right, pianists, we're gonna move into the dynamics category of our learning pyramid. We're gonna follow the minuet steps to really inform where we should give our pulse and our phrase goals and give it some variety. So just a reminder, this would not have been capable of having dynamics back in the Baroque era with the harpsichord And the clavichord, although the harpsichord had 2 manuals or keyboards, so the pianist could have put their hands on different keyboards to make one hand louder than the other. So voicing is appropriate, but the shaping we're going to add is really unique to our beautiful forte piano. So to determine which hand should be voiced, think about the dancers. We would have had the higher female part with all the turns, the stable, noble left hand for the male partner. You're gonna hear that the right hand has a lot more beauty in general, although like measure 8 and measure 12, where the left hand has the 8th notes, you could bring out that left hand. So wherever the moving parts are, I would voice them. And to encourage you to do voicing, I want you just to hear what this would sound like if it had no voicing. Let me start at the beginning. Equal parts of the hands. Okay, let me go in. I'm gonna play my right hand louder. I think that would have been much more appropriate to hear that female part really sing out. So how do you get to that? If you've watched my other tutorials, you've seen me coach you on silent play. So the left hand can first just tap on top of the keys silently. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Add the right hand, play it normal, left hand silent. Once you can get that control of the left hand, it comes back in and gradually plays. The way it sings out. So you can practice that voicing before you start to add in the dynamics and the phrase goals. So the dynamics that you'll see are not from Bach or Petzold. These are all editorial, so you might see different dynamics. So you really have some interpretation to add your own beauty. So I've suggested that we would emphasize the downbeat throughout. That way the dancers are taking a little heavier step on 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I'm also going to add some rise and fall of dynamics. So I'm going to coach you on these dynamics. We're going to start a little heavier. Heavier. And remember, beats 2 and 3 of measure 2 is that plie, or that bending movement from ballet. 1, 2, 3. So you're going to keep your thumb nice and tall so it's light. You can watch that more in my technique video, but that's how we get that light thumb. Here's measure 3, a little bit of an emphasis. Main, goal, light, goal, lighter, goal. Here's the main goal. Let me just explain a little bit more of that. So Bach actually brings out some fun syncopations starting at measure 5 through 8, where we're emphasizing that weak beat of 2. Here's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. The main goal would be at measure 8 at the ends of the cadences, so we still have those macro goals. Measure 9 is a repeat, and I do agree with McGraw where she has a softer dynamic. This could contrast it. Here's the goal, syncopated, 2, 3. So there's 2 macro goals on that first section, would be measure 8 at that cadence and also at measure 15 on beat 2. So practice getting even just the right hand comfortable. We're gonna go into the second page and we have a piano marking which would be appropriate as we go up higher. It'd be even more delicate, the softest part. Those are the main goal of that line at the A major. 21 starts nice and rich. 2-note slurs would be arm weight drops. You get a decrescendo, more, less, goal in the D. Emphasize beat 1, grow 2 here, D, main goals. 2-note slurs, more and less. At the end would come away softer. So we use those classical ideas that we like the dominant harmonies, the D chords to be louder. Even the borrowed secondary dominant major 20 is also louder as well. So take some time using your arm weight to drop. You can check out that second video. I'll really coach you through on using your wrist circles and forearm rotation. That'll help you bring out that dynamic beauty. All right, pianists, we have worked up to the style and mood of this piece. We've been gradually adding in elements to make it sound like a Baroque minuet. I'm just going to give you some reminders of what we've done in summary. So the second most challenging aspect of this piece is really that hand and fingering independence due to the polyphony. Remember, polyphony is those 2 melodies, those curving lines of the Baroque era. So polyphony really comes from a very careful listening. So you can listen back to my demo, you can even just practice left hand along with that so it has its own beauty. A reminder to get this very fluent is to practice hand separate, get those extensions and contractions very fluent. Eyes on the page, trust your hands. Remember the slur lifts at different times to represent the two different dancers, the female, the right hand, and the left hand male partner. Make the rhythm very stable, but I think it should also have some flexibility, a little bit of rubato. This is not like the écossais of Beethoven, or is that driving rhythm where everyone's dancing together. This is really featuring for a minuet one couple who would bow together. There'd be some flexibility. So as you go to phrase goals, you can expand a little bit at the top of those. So some of the rubato could come from the dancers bowing to one another at the ends of sections or the dances. Let's hear it 29. So let it be a little flexible on that tempo as well. Reminder also with the minuet is to not go too fast. Remember the dress of the court dancers, especially the female dancer with her wig and her large dress. Keep it nice and stable, no faster than about that 126 to 138. Within the dynamics category, a reminder to emphasize the downbeat. That way you have 1, 2, 3 for the minuet. There also should be macro goals, as I've shown you on the score for the cadences. Enjoy applying these Baroque minuet ideas to this piece. You can also look at other minuets by other Baroque composers to transfer these ideas, these learning, and these practice strategies. Enjoy the process, pianists.